Welcome to the Science Fiction and Fantasy Marketing Podcast, the show where we help you establish your author brand, increase the size of your audience, and sell more books. I'm Lindsay Baroker, and with me as always is Jeffrey Poole and Joe Lalo. And we decided to bring a guest back on this week because we got bored just talking amongst ourselves. So we have a steampunk author, A.W. Exley. She's going to let us call her Anita. And I'll read her your quick bio here, Anita, and then I'm going to ask you some questions, and you can talk all about yourself. So I stole this from Amazon, as usual, very professional here. So books and writing have been an enormous part of Anita's life. She survived school by hiding out in the library with several thousand fictional characters for company. At the university, she overcame the boredom of studying accounting, or accountancy, as I guess is the New Zealand way to say it, by squeezing in Egyptology papers and learning to read hieroglyphics. I really shouldn't read, guys. I'm not very good at reading out loud. But today, Anita writes fantasy historical novels with a steampunk twist. She lives in rural New Zealand, surrounded by an assortment of weird and wonderful horses, cats, a mad boxer, and chickens who think they are mini velociraptors. I actually did pretty good pronouncing the dinosaur, so I'm proud.
You've done good with lots of long words.
That's why I write, so I don't ever have to talk out loud, just put it all down. But thanks for coming on tonight, Anita, and why don't you give us a little bit, tell us how you started writing and what drew you to steampunk?
Firstly, hi everyone from New Zealand. It's a little bit weird because it's Wednesday afternoon here, so I'm talking to you from the future. I guess I'm like a lot of writers. I've written for as long as I can remember through high school. Went to college, got a job, was sitting in a cubicle one day and thought, I don't want this to be the rest of my life. And I was looking at the bookshelves thinking, I've always wanted to write. Had quite a few trunked manuscripts, thought, well, let's take this seriously. I need an idea, let's write something. And looked at my shelf and I had serial killers sitting next to my books on Egyptology, so I thought, well, let's just mash the two together. Steampunk, I think, just feels right to my brain. I've had a few discarded manuscripts that were fantasy or science fiction, and then I also ride side saddle, wear a corset, so I think I was steampunk before I knew what the word was. Just kind of came naturally. Have a kick-ass character, wears a corset, carries a gun. Seems about right.
All right, and for those who are not watching the video, Anita is wearing a corset right now to talk to us.
Most definitely. I usually do it today. I'm wearing onions.
That's all right. You got to relax on Wednesday afternoon.
Exactly.
So I'm kind of wondering, how did you? We've had a lot of self-publishers on here because we're all self-published, but you're actually with a small press. Do you want to tell us a little bit about how you got signed up with them and how it's going?
Yeah, I am probably like writers. I'd finished the manuscript and I just assumed this big check would turn up in the mailbox. I was kind of disappointed when it didn't, and learned that you had to do this query thing, find and go to publishers that way. And I had a couple of friends who were critique partners who were in the query trenches at the same time, probably piling up quite a number of rejections between a lot of us. And one went off self-publishing and she said, you should give this a go. And I sort of, oh, that's terrifying. It's kind of like standing on the edge of a cliff and it's all black in front of you, and I had no idea what was off in that direction, and it just seemed really scary to me. I just didn't know what I didn't know at that stage. I wasn't getting in from agents, and sent the query off to Curiosity Quills Press, who are a little spec fiction publisher at that stage, and they liked Nefertiti's Heart and said, yeah, we'll take it. And for me, going with a small was kind of like publishing was holding your hand. You've got a really close involvement, but they knew all the people to contact with things like cover art and editors and formatting and marketing. It was kind of like an introduction to this big brave world out there. And then probably must have been about 2 years ago I started reading the blog, those resources, and I loved how you've always shared information and data, and I'd read about what you were doing and I'd go, if only I could do that. Well, look at this market opportunity. And that was when I started to realize, well, there's really great things about a small press. There's things that start to chafe after a little while if you want that control, like it's not being able to do things like changing pricing and categories and keywords, and I just that was like kind of mind-blowing, I guess. And so I'll blame you. So I started self-publishing last year just to get my hand in, as it were, and yeah, have a play in this whole new world.
All right, I will accept the blame for turning you into an indie author. Although, I kind of watch your books because we both have stuff in the steampunk category, and it seems like, I hear horror stories from some authors about small presses, about how they don't do anything, or they're not that effective, or they don't pay on time. It just seems like there's all kinds of horror stories. But, I didn't know for the longest time that you were with a small press, because they seem to be doing all the things that we do as indies. I think they price your novels around $3.99 or so, and I've seen them do 99-cent ads and BookBub and stuff. So do you think it's been a pretty good experience overall?
I think they've, along the way, I know when they started off to look like a trad publisher and then realised that just wasn't working. And I'm sure they've made mistakes along the way, and they've certainly grown. I mean, they've got a catalogue now of over 200 titles. And so I think we've got to the point where my series just kind of ticks along, and I keep looking up at you in the rankings and thinking, there's Lindsay above me. And so I think they've kind of picked off a lot. And yeah, and as you said, BookBub, and I think because they're growing, they're getting in with the publisher side of that too, because I think they have a much longer window that they can submit. I think they have 2 or 3 months as opposed to Indies as a month. I think they're a great name, and they're very proactive. Go to them and say, I want to do this or I want to do that. But yeah, it's getting to the stage now where I think they're getting quite big, and I want to take that control back and do a lot more for myself.
Sure, that totally makes sense. Do you have like a contract with them where they have your series for X number of years, and are there non-competes or anything, or are you kind of free to do what you want with other stuff?
There's no non-compete, for what I'm really grateful. Originally it was a site that was never intended to be a series, and then this really weird thing was people actually bought it and wanted to actually read the book and started asking if there was a sequel. So a sequel got written. That was Hatshepsut's Collar. My cover artist hates me with all these titles. And then they actually sold audio rights to Amazon and Audio for 4 books, which was a bit of a panic because then I had to write 2 more books. So yeah, it's just kind of grown.
Excuse me as I mute and unmute myself over here. Yeah, I sold the audio rights for one of my series too, and they're like, you're gonna have the 5th book ready soon, right? And I'm like, I haven't written the 5th book yet, but I could have it ready.
Yeah, that was my situation. They sold 4 and said all 4, the last 2 were in production, which, I don't know, does a head count as in production? Yeah. So it was a bit of a squeeze to pull them out.
All right, well, let me hand you over to Joe and Jeff. I'm going to ask a few more questions before we jump into the marketing side of the house.
All right, so you mentioned, well, I don't know if I have that down, but I have a question about the audiobooks, so you'll be hearing about them again. But let's just go in the order I've got written so I don't have to scroll around. You're from New Zealand, and here in the States, and as far as I can tell in the rest of the world, New Zealand has sort of gained mythical status thanks to the Lord of the Rings movies. Do you think coming from Middle Earth has helped to develop your fantasy mindset a little bit?
Oh, that's a hard one. And you come back to Lord of the Rings, what was really funny is I was living in Wellington at the time they were making those, and you just took that world for granted. You'd drive down the motorway and you'd go past Mordor. You just sort of saw characters and sets all the time, and it just became part of your reality. But I think the fantasy is just probably because I'm an introvert head than outside world. So yeah, it just came from that, I think.
I think that's what a lot of fantasy authors have in common, is just living in your own head. All right. Do you think that that having New Zealand in your bio gains any points in the minds of readers, like oh well, this person's from where fantasy comes from?
I don't know, and that would be interesting to actually test if readers actually read bios. Do they actually look at the back? I mean, I know I don't. I tend to flick through, read the book, I finished it on this one. Yeah, I don't know. Or has it got more to do with the fact I've got my author photo and I'm wearing a corset? I don't know.
That could be.
Wattpad, I used to have a profile pic that was my ass, and that seemed to gain a few comments. So, it's whatever you do to get a follower, isn't it?
It's true. I went to New York Comic Con one time, and I bought a $70 pair of Steampunk goggles, largely because the person selling them was wearing a corset. So it's highly effective. All right, moving on. So you write historical fantasy with a twist. Would you say, what do you think is the best balance between history and fantasy for a story? Is history the main course and fantasy the garnish, or do you try to mix it differently than that?
Gosh, I think it depends where you're going with the story. I mean, in mine, I like to really stick with actual historical figures. That's why I like to play with Queen Victoria, mess with her a little because she's a little staid, let's tickle her up a bit. And I think it depends on how you want to do it. I've got other historical fantasy books which are very, very little resemblance, to actual history. To use an example as an extreme with Steampunk, Mel Jean Brooks with her series, we have nanotechnology coming out of sort of Attila the Hun and the Hordes, which is just so fantastical, and then the flow-on effect of that. So her London sort of bears very little resemblance to a Victorian London, but that fits her story. So I think it's a hard question, how true to stick to the characters you have. I love finding these little lesser-known characters and maybe bringing them forth in a story. So that in itself means I need something slightly more real, I guess, than fantastical. And I know there's a lot of steampunk fans who will salivate that my books aren't steampunk because I haven't gone in depth into that genre. Completely created a whole new world or a whole new system of technology. It's subjective. I think it's what people want, isn't it?
Yeah, it's true, and you don't. There's no real gatekeepers to genre. People well, that's sort of what my next question is how people tend to be sticklers with sci-fi and fantasy, and really with sci-fi and history, for example, and anything with any sort of tangential basis in fact. There are usually sticklers who come along to speak up when you don't get something quite right. Have you had any problems with people who feel as though the history aspect wasn't the way they wanted it to be?
I know. I probably shouldn't mention reviews. I know I've got one where the person got really upset about the historical inaccuracies, and I thought, yeah, but mechanical horses and airships should have been the first clue it wasn't a strict historical. And I think that's the problem when you walk a finer edge, that there are people who think it should be strict historical, and it's not. I do things that suit me and suit my world. And then at the other extreme, I've found the steampunk community quite odd. It seems that die-hard steampunk people don't like my books at all, and I'm not steampunk, and I've got flack. And yet I've had so many people come up to me and say, look, I've never read a steampunk book before. I picked yours up because I loved the cover, and this is a really interesting genre, and they've gone on to read others. So it's been really interesting that my main audience is actually not in the steampunk community.
Yeah, it's like I've had a lot of people who came to my fantasy series via sci-fi for some reason. So it's amazing how much crossover you can get from people who wouldn't normally have read something in your genre if you've got just enough of it to attract their interest.
Yeah, or a pretty in a corset, and they'll flick you $3, give it a go.
That too, yep. That does it for my questions for this section. So now I'm going to toss you off to Jeff for the next set.
So you're saying all I need to do is find a girl, take a picture of her in a corset, put that under like the author bio of some fashion, and I can sell more books that way. I'm going to have to remember that.
I think you should give it a go.
All right. I have just a couple of general type of questions for you. I know you've written multiple books. On average, how long does it take you to write a book from beginning to end?
I think I'm getting quicker. Like the first book was probably like Drawing Blood. It was over a year. The second book was probably about 9 months. I stalk Lindsay on Facebook too, when she says like she's done 10,000 words or something, and I sort of think, wow, that's really amazing. But I think, as you get more productive, I think you become more productive. Like at the moment, I've got a trilogy I've plotted out, written by the end of the year, so I'm giving myself 3 months for each book.
Do you have another set of eyes? Like for instance, I don't know if you're married or whatnot, or have a best friend or something that you can say, "Hey, I just finished this particular chapter. Would you mind taking a look at this before I send it off to an editor or a proofreader or something like that?"
Oh, heck yeah. Hubby is a military nut, so he usually, and he's a history buff as well, so he usually has first read, and despite the fact he lives with me, he's actually quite brutal, no spare my feet.
Yeah, I've
He's
got a
also,
similar. Oh, go ahead.
so he pulls me up on historical detail, and also he's been really good if I have any fight scenes. He always says, you can't have someone doing this or you can't have someone doing that. So that's really he's the alpha reader, I suppose, as it were.
Yeah, my wife does something similar where I'll print out completed chapters and I'll give them to her, and I see her reach for the highlighters. I'm like, oh boy, here we go.
Yeah,
but
you're in trouble.
yeah, she'll like, okay, well, this one looks good. You've got a typo here, and I call it my traditional WTF moments. Like, what were you thinking when you wrote this part? It has no correlation with the rest of the story, but it's good to have somebody that you can rely on to say, what do you think, and not have to worry about them trying to hurt your feelings, or just say, this part you really should consider redoing, or this part looks great, let's go on to the next chapter, sort of thing. So that part's really cool. And I heard you mentioning a few things before about reviews, that people that like to nitpick just about everything. How do you handle the inevitable bad review? I mean, do you feel authors should address the comments or just let it go?
No, you've got to cue Elsa here singing "Let It Go" from Frozen, and it's a learnt skill too, isn't it? I mean, when my first book came out, it felt like my baby, and when those first negative reviews came in, it was heart shattering. I would crawl under the desk with a bottle of vodka and go into the frog state that it was all over. And I think it is that process. You learn to let it go. I mean, I'm at the stage now I just don't even look. They're not there for me. They're there for the readers, and I'm fairly active on grades, and that's the thing I try and other authors. They're not there. Don't engage. They're there for other readers. And reading is so subjective. I can name books that I didn't enjoy. I can name books that I really love, and other people might not feel the same. And my go-to thing is to always look at negative reviews on books I've loved. If I do actually glance at a review, I need a bit of a pick-me-up. And my favourite is Bram Stoker's Dracula. If you look at the one-star reviews, there are people complaining that it's like he's never read Twilight at all and doesn't know what vampires should look like.
Yeah, I've seen a few of those before too, and actually I think it was the Bram Stoker's Dracula where I was looking at it. I was like, I don't believe it. These individuals are comparing a classic piece of literature to sparkly vampires. I'm like,
Yeah.
no.
But what
can't
makes
do
me
that
laugh
now.
is they don't even know the timeline that came
Yeah.
before. I mean, it just shows reviews are subjective. What one person likes, another person might hate. You can't look at those for your feedback. You have to rely on those critique partners and the editors and those people before you push publish. And that's a skill you have to learn. Once the book is out there, you just let it go. You can't second guess yourself.
Yeah, that's one piece of advice I always give to people that tell me that they're looking to release their first novel. I always tell them, you have got to be willing to handle the good reviews as well as the bad. I mean, you have to understand you cannot please everybody, no matter how hard you try. You might put your heart and soul into this book, and everybody tells you it's great. You're going to get someone that's just going to rip it to shreds because they don't understand your writing style, they just don't care for it, and they have no qualms about making it known to the whole world.
Yep.
First couple of bad reviews I got, I'm like, you little turkeys, you don't know me. I wanted to take offense to it. It's like, you know what? If everybody starts saying the same things, then I'll pay attention and maybe I need to change something. But the vast majority of the reviews are really, really good. So there's always a few bad apples out there, but you can't please them all. So the next question I have is actually the final question I have on this sort of thing is there any piece of advice you can give first-time authors that you wished you would have done when you first began your writing career?
Start 10 years ago.
So go ahead.
And yeah, probably the best one is to grow that thick skin, to learn how to let it go. I mean, we all need someone we can talk to, and I've got my chickens out the back. I'll go out there and I'll say, look at this review, and they can all go there, buck, 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 and that person's going to get it from the chickens. Yeah, you need that release, but don't ever put it online. I mean, yeah, let it go.
All right, good deal. All right, in that case, I'm going to hand you back over to, looks like Joe. He's got a couple of marketing questions for you.
Yep. All right, so we're going to start with, since we're using the internet for this little discussion, For social media, how much do you use it, and what social media sites are you on?
I call myself the anti-social media person because I'm geographically remote, so everything has to be online. But for me, I look at that 80-20 rule. Where is my time best spent? And I'm really not social. I've got Twitter, I don't know how to use it. Probably the big thing for me is Facebook. I use my page, and that's where I interact with my readers. Apart from that, I do very little. For me, my time's much better spent writing the next book. Now, I don't have a catalogue behind. I think I just need to grow my readership that way. And also, newsletter would be the other thing too, just getting those sign-ups so I know I've got those people all ready to go, hopefully getting a bit excited about the next book.
That's absolutely a good policy, and it's funny because once we start having to promote ourselves, the whole fact that we live inside our heads becomes a real liability. So, as you say, you're remote, and your promotion has to be mostly digital. Have you done any personal appearances, conventions,
No,
such?
no. I did one last year, which I went with a friend who's an artist, and I bought something like $1,000 worth of stock, got dressed up in my corset and my top hat and all the rest of it, and I didn't sell a single book. I had lots of people take my photo though and ask where I got my corset from, but yeah, if I was selling autographed photos, I would have done much better.
Well, at least you got noticed, which is what a lot of people are after.
Yep.
All right, so now for the audiobook question that I spoke about earlier. I see you've got a few audiobooks in your catalog. You say they were handled by the publisher, correct?
Yep. Curiosity Quills sold the audiobooks to Amazon, so after that I had very little input. They selected the narrator, who I think did a wonderful job, but she got an American accent. I find it quite weird. Sense.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you had any input on the narrator, because it's like I've done some audiobooks and I've done it in a few different ways, and picking the narrator A is the most fun when you're allowed to, and the most harrowing when you have no choice at all. Like, this could come out awful within the first 3 words if they had the wrong narrator.
I guess it makes sense when you think about the market. Probably the larger market is the American one, and so it's a familiar voice for that market. If we had a Kiwi narrating it with quite a twang, or an Aussie, it probably would have been a completely different book.
It could be. Interestingly enough, the book that I was able to choose my own narrator from anyone I liked, I chose someone with an Irish accent, and almost entirely because they pronounced the word strawberry strawberry.
Oh, see, I would have fallen for that. Or Scottish. If I could have David Tennant narrate my books, that would do it for me.
Yeah, it's some people do. We've had some authors on who seek out actors specifically, and I'm probably not aiming that high, but yeah. So when you are able to do your own audiobooks, sometimes there are people who raise money specifically because they have a specific actor in mind.
It's something to keep in mind if we ever get to that stage. David Tennant, Kickstarter.
Hey, could happen. No, okay, so you are in New Zealand. I was actually lucky enough to have a few fans, more than a few fans, in New Zealand and Australia. A lot of it was luck, and some of it was a local promotion. Have you found that you've got any clusters of fans in places that might surprise you?
I don't know if I really paid that much attention to where they come from. I guess that's the great thing about the global village now with Facebook and email. I could be talking to someone who's down the road, or like you guys, who's sitting somewhere in the States, I assume. I'm actually not really aware that I've got any little clusters and bizarre spots, but if there are, shout out.
Yeah, I've found you expect English-speaking fans. I ended up with, oddly enough, some Bulgarian fans, which led to something else, which we've spoken out in other shows, and it's always remarkable. I'm always surprised that anyone read my stuff, and then when I find out that people from places I may never see are reading my stuff, it's remarkable.
Yep. Or when you look at your Amazon sales account and you've got sales Brazil or like that. And I think, or Japan. It's like, wow, someone over there is actually reading my book. Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, we've spoken on the show in the past about like if you like through Smashwords, the all the different currencies that Apple sells books in, and then you'll see one come up in a place, and you have to like look it up and like, oh wow, that's
Yeah.
Scandinavia.
I think I had that once with Norway.
There's a lot of kroners we've found.
Yep.
Yeah, I guess my only other question would be, and it just sort of answered it, like when you do your promotion, you don't really target specific groups of people or areas. Do you? Like, do you have any specific readers in mind when you do your marketing?
Not really. Again, it comes back to that sort of being the anti-social media person. I think I'm like a lot of people. I've seen social media become this white noise of authors pitching to other authors, and so I really do very little these days. I rely on the big guns like a BookBub ad. Recently, Amazon picked up Nefertiti's Heart. It was a Kindle daily book deal, so that just took it sky high. Apart from that, I don't target it at all. I do it in a very active way. Like I belong to a costuming group where we trade corsets, which I know sounds weird, but just go with it. And if I send something overseas, I always stick a paperback in, because these are other women who are going to conventions. They're going to steampunk, things like that. And if I can get them on board books, then they become my ambassadors, as it were, to sort of push the word. So I sort of go about it, but probably on a very micro level.
That's I gotta say, I don't think we've ever had anybody pursue that particular promotional path. So I'll have to keep that in mind if ever I start trading corsets.
You've got to use what you've got, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I still think every paperback you give away is another one that's out there in the world somewhere.
Oh yeah. I'm a strong proponent of giving things to readers. Like, if it's in more readers' hands, it can only be good for you.
Yep.
And that sort of concludes my marketing questions. So now you're going to go back to Jeff for his questions.
Joe, you put on a corset. You take a picture of that, put it on Facebook. I will buy a bunch of your books right here, right now. I'm just going to tell you.
I reckon you should put it on YouTube, getting them laced in. It could go viral.
It could. Don't tempt me.
Hey, I just said to someone today, Captain Kirk used to wear a corset, so they're not just for women.
Okay. What has been your most effective tool when trying to attract new readers to your books, do you think?
BookBub, definitely. I mean, it's the 1,000-pound gorilla in the room, isn't it? You just can't beat it. You can try. I know there's a lot of other places and resources to advertise, but you just can't beat that power of that single mail out to 200,000 people, and next minute you see you're selling 2,000 books for the day. I don't think I've found anything that's as good yet.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of good stuff about BookBub. I need to do one myself. So, okay, I heard you mention before that it sounds like you do, but do you utilize mailing lists? And if so, how often are your mailings?
Yeah, I've just started the mailing list, and that's something that's growing very slowly because my main series is with the publisher. They have the call to action is to their main mailing list, so I've had to sort of be a bit sneaky to grow my own. And I don't use it very often, probably about 6 times a year, so every 2 months, and it would just be when there's a new release or a sale. I know, most people probably have heaps of these coming into their inboxes, so I try and keep it brief and just when there's something pertinent.
Okay. Do you have any advice for those of us that are trying to increase their subscriber lists?
No, in fact, I was going to ask you guys because mine sucks. I hear of people getting 10, 20, 30 mail ups, sign-ups a day sort of thing, and I probably only get 1 or 2 a week.
That ties into the other part of this particular question is I've heard other authors hint at offering free ebooks for anyone that subscribes. I mean, do you think that's a good idea? And if so, would you consider doing it?
I've actually done that with mine. I've got a little novella that's just 100 pages, and that ties into my main series, and that was one I self-published last year. So I've set that up as a free ebook for newsletter subscribers, but I really don't know if it works as an incentive. I mean, I haven't promoted it or anything, and since I've done that, I certainly haven't seen any change.
All right. Yeah, I've got a short story that I haven't published anywhere else either. And I'm contemplating, offering that as a promotional gimmick. Say, hey, go ahead and sign up for the newsletter, and I'll give you a free ebook sort of thing, or a free
Yeah.
short story sort of thing there. But yeah, we'll see. What would you say has been your most ineffective marketing strategy that you wish you wouldn't have bothered trying, provided there is one?
I tried one of those books websites that they crop up every now and then, sign up here and we'll market your book and go viral. I think it was Book Daily. It cost me $50, and what I didn't realize at the time is they set up a recurring charge on your credit card.
Ah.
So I thought I'll stop that, but I found there was just nothing. No change in rank, no sales came from that site. And that was when I sort of made the realization that a lot of those types of sites were marketing themselves to authors but not to readers. And that's when I thought, you know what, I'm just going to keep writing books and keep submitting to BookBub.
So the moral of that story is, read the fine print and make sure they don't try and set you up for a recurring charge.
Yeah, definitely. And it's a learning curve, isn't it? You get burnt and then you get more cautious with the next one. And you see a lot of sites like that because I hang out on Goodroads, you see people say, oh, it's a new site that's only going to cost this much, and they'll make my book go viral, or they'll send it out to all these people. But you've really got to be careful, I think, and have a good nose around. And the thing I found was actually talking to readers, where do they find their next book? And most of them have never heard of these sites. They're not getting their information from there. They're just browsing Amazon, or they're using mailing lists like BookBub, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, that's what I usually will do now. Is if I come across a site like that, it's like, I wonder how effective they are. I'll do like a quick, like a Google search or something, and just see, if anyone else has used these people. And then if no one's ever heard of them, usually what I'll do is I'll go to the whois.com database, look up that domain name, and find out when the little boogers was created. And usually it's like in the last month or two, like, nope, not falling for that one.
Yep.
All right. Okay, that's the last of my marketing questions. Lindsay, I'm going to pass it over to you.
All right. Somehow I did the order, so I didn't get to talk for a long time there. It was very sad. But yeah, I'll just ask you a few more questions here. I was kind of curious. I really like the covers that Curiosity Quills did for your Artifact Hunter series. And did you have any input on the covers, or did they just kind of do it for you?
Definitely input for me, and particularly that first one. I just had this image in my head, and I had a look around at a lot of other steampunk books, and I know they all use like the girl in the corset, and I said, I hate that. To me, that's the stereotype, and I wanted to stay like a mile away from it. The guy who does graphic artist, I think he's kind of drew this stick figure of a hand holding a heart, and I said, can you make this happen? And he did, and we kind of stuck to that concept for the covers. It's just a hand and an artifact, and it's really simple, but I think it works in the thumbnail. And I think particularly that first book, for me, it's been such a great cover that nothing else has sort of compared ever since. Every other cover, it's kind of like, it's just not as good.
Well, if you're going to have the great one, it's probably best to have it on the first book in the series, so it can attract a lot of people, rather than like, oh, book 7 had the awesome cover, but yeah, only those people who are already in the series noticed it. I definitely think it's a challenge with steampunk and science fiction to some extent too, trying to find, stock photos and things that you can use to make a cover. Custom illustrations can get pretty expensive, but I was curious because I noticed on some of your more recent books you have done people rather than the symbols. Have you noticed any difference in if one's more effective than the other?
Yeah, the latest one, Heart of a Kraken, that's a completely different story. So I wanted it's a new world and it's going to be a new series. So I wanted a really different feel to differentiate it from the other one. And that's why that one actually came out. The artist, it's Regina, May I Design, she does her own photo shoots. And it just came up in my news feed that she'd done this underwater photo shoot. So the model's actually underwater. And I saw this photo and I just said, wow, that's like the one I want for this book. So that's how that came about. Yeah. All
right. Yeah. I was kind of wondering, it sounds like you picked steampunk because that most appeals to you, and it's just sort of what I didn't pick it either. I just I was writing these fantasy stories in a kind of 1800s setting, and everybody started saying, "Oh yeah, that's steampunk. That's steampunk." And like, I don't really think that is, but I'm going to go with it because the category is a lot less competitive than epic fantasy. So I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on, especially for maybe for new authors, if is it worth trying to target a smaller category like that in order to more easily get some ranking and visibility?
It's interesting because I think steampunk, the category's really grown in the last 2 years. I think it's a lot harder to get that ranking now, and I'm saying that because my books are dropping off the first page after 2 years. Yeah, and there's such a range in there, isn't there? You look at some of the books, like we've got Jim Booker, who's just owned the top spot for months now with his new steampunk series. So it'll be interesting to see how complex that world is. Too is increasing its categories, isn't it? There's just a lot of narrow ones now, and I think it's definitely worth looking at. I mean, my latest book, which I affectionately call my tentacle porn, because it's about a kraken and a mermaid. I had a look, and I've got that in sea stories because that was a smaller, smaller category, so that's getting a good ranking in there.
Yeah, I would definitely say though, if you've ever tried epic fantasy, I think I have a book right now that's like 1800 sales ranking, and it's 3 in steampunk, and it'd be like 60 or 80 in epic fantasy, if that. So I think it's a good idea to target the smaller categories for sure. And I'll be looking for your Kraken porn, and where's that going to be exactly? Erotica?
It's tentacle porn. Actually, no, it was going to be tentacle porn, and then I googled how octopuses have sex, and I thought, nah, I just cannot make that sexy. So it's a bit fade to black, I'm afraid.
All right, so it probably won't be in the erotica section then.
No.
I think they want all the details there.
I think if they did like a cephalopod erotica category, I could own that.
I don't know. I hear the Japanese do some interesting things with that in the anime, but it's not really my specialty. So my last kind of question for you is, can you talk about sort of the power of writing in a series? I think that especially when you're not doing a lot of social media and stuff, it really seems like at some point your books kind of start to sell themselves when you get up there.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely something I've got from reading your blog and stalking you and what you've done. And that was the advantage of having the 4 books sold to audio. I've noticed for me, book 1, it kind of sold, but it just, I guess, didn't sell well. Book 2, we saw a little blip of an increase, but it wasn't until book 3 came out last year that it really seems to have gained traction and it's got its own legs now. So we've got book 4 comes out next, and that's the series. Though my fans came to me, no, there's no way it ended, and I keep saying to them, I'm killing everybody. That's it. I'm moving on to the next series, and nobody believes. So we'll see what happens there. Get a mob of angry fans soon coming to demand a book 5, but yeah. But I think it's definitely it's like a rolling stone, isn't it? It seems to gain its own traction the more books you have in the series, and people seem to get invested in those characters.
Yeah, for sure. I just launched something new, and I'm trying to remind myself, like, don't judge anything based on how the first book does. It's going to suck until you get like a BookBub ad on the box set, and So, do you think that? Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say I agree with that. It's one of those things, and I think that's what I got from you. There's really no point in marketing 1 book, and probably even 2 books. There's not a lot of, you're not going to get that sell through, and I think it's that sort of critical mass once you get to 3 or 4 in a series that you've got all those marketing opportunities open up, or like per book 1 or BookBub, and then you get that sell through.
Right, and you do get more options when you've got more books out. You can start tinkering with the categories, and like sometimes I'll put the first book in one category, like the most logical category, but then if it can maybe fit over here in Swords and Sorcery or whatever to the second book, I might put somewhere else, and it just seems like you have more options when you do have 4 or 5 books out there for sure.
Definitely, and that's also the advantage of self-publishing over having a publisher. My publisher sets the categories and the keywords. I don't have any say in that, so it's like if I want to try something else, I kind of can't. And that's also the other reason for self-publishing now. I'm getting to be a bit of a control freak. I want to do all that myself. I want to tinker, and I've really loved with the 2 books I've got out so far that I did myself. I can play with those keywords, and you can see the results. It's really cool.
Yeah, I think it would make me a little crazy. Like just now, I'm as I mentioned, I'm doing the audiobooks with Podium Publishing, and they put the first trilogy out there for pre-order, and it's driving me nuts that I can't log into a dashboard anymore and see, because a couple of people said, oh, I bought it. I was like, oh, I want to check. Did anybody else buy it? You know, should I be marketing the pre-orders? Or
But particularly too for marketing, you know, if you can't check those figures, you don't know what's working. And that's, you know, as much as I love my small press, that's the thing. If I do something, I have no idea if it's worked. You can only really look at sales rank and see has that moved. And if it goes down, you know, you don't do that again.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And on some of the other stores, even sales ranking, it's hard to tell. Like on Kobo, you can be kind of up there in the sales ranking because it's such a smaller store, especially if you're looking at like Kobo US. And you're like really excited, and then you find out, oh, I sold 3 books today. Okay. All right, but it's been great talking to you, and I guess in closing, I'd love to ask if you have any parting advice for authors or any thoughts on like kind of what's going to be the next big thing with marketing.
Gosh, I'd really be interested in how interactive books go, because that's got a lot of potential. And you see websites now where you can add like music and soundtracks for people who are reading through your books. And I just think we're at a pretty exciting time, and it's changing so quickly. It's just not that flexible that you can adapt, you know, and let's just see what's coming. Yeah.
All right, cool. Why don't you finish up by telling us where your website is and maybe the name of your first book that people could check out?
Website is www.awexley.com. First book is Nefertiti's Heart, which is set in London, 1860, about a woman whose father dies and finds she inherits a whole lot of things which are a lot more than they seem. And I just want to say thanks, Lindsay, for having me here today, and you've been quite an inspiration for me. As I said, I've been stalking you for about blog, so I just got a fangirl over here for a minute.
Oh, cool.
Thanks, guys. I'm really looking forward to seeing the YouTube video of you both lacing up into a corset.
I'm looking forward to seeing that too, although I'd probably I'm such a tomboy, I'd be the least likely of the group to get into one. I don't know. Joe looks like he's contemplating it over there.
Well, yeah, you know, if I can find one the right size, you never know. You can never tell what goes viral. I have no shame.
That becomes the question: is what will you do in order to help market your books? I'm thinking I'm discovering a line which I'm going to go like, no, not going to happen.
All right, well, that's it from me, and it was great having you on the show. Thanks for coming to chat with us.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.
See you later.